Identity politics doesn't just make people annoying. It makes them stupid. If everything is ultimately about race, then, well, everything is ultimately about race. Tax cuts? Race. The Constitution? Race. Crime? Race. All of politics, with its nuances and its undulations, becomes nothing more than an investigation into skin. There's an oddball sketch from the British comedy troupe Big Train that mocks this sort of monomaniacal thinking. A new man is introduced to a couple of friends in a pub, and he responds to literally everything by contending that it must be a veiled reference to his not being married. Shockingly enough, the poor guy in the sketch who is trying to tell a story is not, in fact, talking about the man he has never met before not being married. Enter Politico, which has a piece up to date titled, "The Real Origins of the Religious Right," the purpose of which is to suggest that the tens of millions of Americans who care deeply about abortion do not actually care about abortion, but are just good old-fashioned racists. It would be worth addressing the historical argument being made here at greater length. But, for now, I want to push back against the broader implication of the piece, which was summed up well by the editor-at-large of Newsweek, MSNBC's Naveed Jamali, who argued this morning that the pro-life movement has always been about white supremacy. This is the sort of nonsense that one begins to spout when one has turned off one's brain, and, instead of thinking questions through, decided that there can be only two sort of people in America, good people and white supremacist people. It is also a ridiculous non sequitur. It is not true that the pro-life movement came out of white supremacy. But even if it were, as is true of, say, the gun control movement, which until 1970 really was inextricable from racism, that would in no way imply that modern pro-lifers were motivated by animus toward people who aren't white. They're not. Indeed, the argument doesn't even make sense. For a research paper put together by the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, and presented to Congress, clearly, there is no white supremacist in the world who would look at these numbers and say, boy, we'd better stop that. The idea is self-evidently absurd, which is why real-life white supremacists tend to be militantly pro-choice. When one adds to this that, per polling from last year, white people seem to have almost identical views on abortion to Hispanic people, the claim becomes sillier still. All told, the core position held by pro-lifers is simple, that an unborn child is alive, and that it is wrong to take innocent life. They may disagree on a few details or on the most appropriate set of government policies, and they may have arrived at their beliefs for different reasons or at different times. Despite being an atheist, I have always been pro-life, even in England, where that is an unusual position. But the root contention is pretty elementary, that there are two bodies involved in a pregnancy, and that deliberately killing one of them is morally wrong. Jimmy Carter, as with almost everything else at stake in our modern politics, simply doesn't enter into the equation. Share on Facebook, share on Twitter, share on Flipboard, email this article, print this article. In law in the courts, Trump's legacy comes into focus. Trump's legacy comes into focus. Did Texas hand Biden a lifeline? Did Texas hand Biden a lifeline? states, physicians sue to stop Biden administration's sex discrimination policies. States, physicians sue to stop Biden administration's sex discrimination policies. The end row deserves? The end row deserves?